We have Jonathan with us this afternoon. He is a Learning with the Authors speaker. We're so thrilled to have him. He and Connie have spent time together before talking about this whole virtual classroom and online learning, and he is going to be talking about synchronized teaching and online learning in real time. So Jonathan, I'm going to go ahead and turn the floor over to you and welcome. We are so glad that you are here and can't wait to hear what you have to share with us. Take the floor.
Thank you so much, and it's delightful to be with all of you. I'm really flattered for the invitation and also for Connie's very kind comments. As far as running circles around you, I have been hanging out in this room for the last half hour or so with several of you, and I can assure you, if there are any circles being run, it is by all of you, an amazingly energetic and talented group of people. So this should be a lot of fun. I am going to go ahead and actually do a little bit of, shall we say, application sharing today and bring up my screen. So stand by as that begins to emerge on your screen. I do hope you will think of this as a conversation and jump in. You can just grab the microphone and even cut me off mid-sentence, or if you feel like you want to raise your hand, don't hesitate to do that. And the chat is always open and welcome. The title of my session does not match today the title of the book that gave me the speaking slot that you have all so kindly offered. Although we will all be learning in real time, today we're going to be talking about how this kind of learning can be recognized. And I know Connie spoke earlier today about digital credentials and badges and about her amazing work in this space. And what I thought I would do today is take a step back and from my own work and share with you some trends and some really interesting ways that achievement is being recognized today in some non-traditional ways. Another way of thinking about my session is giving credit where credit is due. It might be useful though because I have to constantly remind myself how I wound up so interested in this topic of recognizing lifelong achievement, and so it might be useful for you to hear just in half a minute or a minute about where my interest comes from. For the last dozen years, I have been working on creating online learning programs that are innovative, that are interesting, that kind of capture the way experts teach and share their knowledge and encourage others in the community to become experts themselves. That work grew out of the work that was actually involved in creating real-time collaboration platforms. In fact, very much related to the one we're in here today, formerly Illuminate and Horizon. And so my interest really stems from the fact that a lot of the best learning experiences that I've been a part of have happened in kind of off-the-radar environments, non-traditional ways, in online office hours where the record button wasn't even on, or when kids were doing online debates and facing off on topics that would have put anyone on a talking head on CNN or MSNBC to shame. And yet a lot of that stuff doesn't truly get assessed or recognized in any way where we can kind of carry it forward and have it represent us in new settings. Any of you know what I'm talking about? Can you think of something in your own world today, something that you know you can do, a skill that you have, that doesn't have any formal or recognized credential? What are you good at that maybe some of your colleagues at work might not necessarily know? What are you good at that maybe some of your family members might not realize you're good at? What kind of skills have you picked up since the last time you changed jobs or moved from one place to the other? You may or may not have updated your resume, but you've certainly updated your skills in that time. So what are some of those things? There may not be a diploma saying you can do it. Uh-oh, I gotta watch out. I'm not gonna use the chat because Misty's gonna get me because I'm not the best speller. But no, absolutely. But that's a skill, being really good at spelling. Website maintenance, absolutely. That's the kind of stuff you just learn on the job sometimes, right? You figure it out the hard way. You search online community forums. You ask the smarter person in the room, if there is one, right? When you're learning, and you ultimately, before you know it, you are the smartest person in the room when it comes to website maintenance. And knitting. Right? Amazing. Who knew that you made what you were wearing necessarily. So there's a lot of that, and I think there's a lot of reasons that there's more of that going on. So I'm going to sort of pull from my experience today in a lot of these kind of spontaneous or serendipitous settings and think about how we can help improve the lives of people whose skills we are in a position to observe and recognize, so that the next time they're in a place where those skills are needed, other people will know about it. Okay, excellent. So I'm going to go ahead and bring up this chart, because this kind of says a lot to me, for me, about this, what I'm talking about here. Oh, and thank you, Connie. No, that's very kind of you. This is a little diagram that shows how much of the learning we do during our waking day happens in a formal learning environment versus an informal learning environment. We all kind of know this intuitively, but here's a group out of the University of Washington and Stanford University that got together and just tried to put some numbers on it. So when you're in K-12 environment, you spend less than 20% of your waking hours, 18.5%, in a formal school campus classroom. And then if you go on to undergraduate or graduate work, you're spending a dwindling amount of your waking hours in that environment. And before you know it, you're like many of us, and while you might work in a formal learning environment as part of your professional practice, you are not. Your learning continues in a large way outside of that space. And so, how can we find ways of giving credit for all of that work? That's what led me to my work with Credly and where I am today and what my main focus is. And that's how do we create platforms, tools, and approaches to allow people to surface the learning that happens, validate it, tie the unusual sometimes, if not more traditional forms of evidence, and then make those achievements safe and ready for people to use, not only to show others what they can do, but to show themselves what they can do. Now that you recognize that you know how to do web maintenance, Davina, you might be interesting for somebody to tell you, did you know that if you're good at web maintenance or knitting, you might also like, and lead you in directions and open doors for you that you might not have thought of. So this is what I'm excited about, and we've been developing different tools and platforms to help people do that. All of this, I haven't said the word badges once, but that's really the key word that's causing a lot of buzz today. Because it's easy to take everything I just took 5.5 minutes to say and just say, let's put a badge on it. But the badge is it's one blip in the whole story about how to recognize achievement that's not being recognized. It's easy to talk about badges because we know what they mean. Badges are things that the Girl Scouts and the Cub Scouts and the military have used as such an important part of how they recognize merit and what's important in those communities. They've managed to figure out what their values are, what's valuable to the people they serve, and then identify each of those in the form of an achievement, and then create a progressive structure so that people understand the value of those achievements from one to the next. And so it's a valuable lesson, and it makes perfect sense to think about the way we deal with learning today, to kind of put it in these terms, because there are so many skills and there are so many pathways. There's not just one way to get there. Have any of you earned a non-traditional form of credit, something other than a diploma, other than a certificate, other than a degree? Not that all of those things can't be represented by what we talk about when we talk about badges today, but take all the traditional forms of learning off the table. Have you earned have you learned any badge, digital or embroidered or knitted, in your life that represents something that you didn't necessarily get a degree or a transcript or an official certificate for? Anyone? That includes Cub Scouts and Girl Scouts and 4-H and other things. Anybody? You can use the chat. You can jump on the mic. What have you earned a badge or a non-traditional achievement for? We have another knitter in the bunch. Louise joins Wayne, I believe, and won an award for machine knitting at the State Fair of Texas. That's pretty cool. Girl Scout leader stuff, not just the girls themselves, but for being a leader. NRA instructors patches, absolutely that counts, Wayne. And I love that Charmaine got a geocaching gold award. That's a pretty cool thing. So certainly athletics and sports, and so we're all kind of familiar with this concept, but why shouldn't we embrace it and bring it in even into our formal learning settings and think about these kind of pathways that they envelop, that they unfold. World of Warcraft is a game that has badges. Many online games do it, so it's not just Scouts, and there are social media tools that have used this strategy to recognize things. But what I'm really curious about is, what about everything else we do? And can we bring the same kind of assessment, not necessarily the same assessments, but the same idea about bringing assessments into other parts of our life, or even into parts of our classroom that aren't currently set up to observe achievement, whether they be online or face-to-face classrooms. And that's really what brings us to the notion of digital badges for learning. So how are digital badges different from their embroidered counterparts, before we jump in and take a look at some examples? Anyone have any thoughts? What makes a digital badge specifically unique from an embroidered badge? You go ahead and just throw some things into the chat or jump on the mic for me. If you're thinking about a digital version of a badge, what kind of unique attributes can it have, or does it have, even if you're not familiar with digital badges yet? They are harder to sew on a computer. I can't argue with that. Although it's funny, with all the maker movement stuff, people hooking up 3D printers, not that that's exactly sewing, but there are sewing machines hooked up to computers these days. So, but I'm not gonna. That's not my specialty. Allstate does that every 6 months when I get a refund check. Oh, that's interesting. It has metadata. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, this is sort of my little list. It's kind of related to a few of yours. It's not limited by space on your jacket or your sash. You can have an unlimited number of digital credentials. You can also have credentials that are shareable. So it's not just about who can see you wearing them on your uniform, who is in your presence at a given moment. They can be put out on the web and elsewhere. They're also backed, and very importantly, backed by data. Not that embroidered badges aren't, but the data is visible. Whereas when I look at a military uniform, I don't know what each badge means. But if I could click on it, and I'd have to be careful if the person I was the uniformed officer whose badge I was tapping was not armed and dangerous. But I can't click on their uniform and have it tell me what they got it for. But I can click on a badge and get that information. And I can get the evidence that backs up why that person earned it, which could be valuable, not to mention inspirational, to see what someone had to do. And there's multiple sources of information as well, of achievements. Usually when you look at a Scout, you see badges they earned in Scouts. I think it's rare to see badges they earned from the military or from their classroom or from other places. So they tend to be siloed in a lot of ways. But digital badges need not be. They can be seen side by side with creating a fuller picture of who somebody is. And they can also represent things from across your lifespan. A Girl Scout tends to be in Girl Scouts for a period of her life, and unless she goes on to become a Scout leader, as some of you are, the uniform gets put away and that part of her life gets left behind. But a digital badge, there's a continuum, and those badges can be around to be curated and shared. By the way, if anyone has any questions or comments or wants to take issue or agree with me as we go along, and even just type in the chat, here, or I'm with you, just let me know. I don't want to necessarily either I feel like I'm preaching to the choir or that I'm not giving you a chance to disagree on anything. So that's a little bit of digital badges. But it's all about context, and that's one great advantage of a digital badge. You don't tend to take your badges off a uniform, and yet digital badges, you can kind of decide what to show and what not to show. I got a badge for going to a conference last year. I was actually there to talk about badges. It was a face-to-face conference, and they gave me one of these things. And it's a conference that's been around for a long time related to education. And I was a little embarrassed to put this badge, on my conference badge because I've been involved in e-learning and whatnot for a long time, but I'd never been to this well-known conference, and I was a little embarrassed that it was my first time. So while they were pleased to acknowledge me, and so that others would be able to give me a warm welcome, make me feel at home, I was a little embarrassed that it was my first time, and I chose to pull this off my conference tag and put it in my pocket. So just because somebody recognizes you for something doesn't mean that at that particular moment it means as much to you as it did to the issuer. However, I'm showing this to you now. It means something more to me now than it did at the moment, because now it represents a realization or a kind of a sense of, what's the word, I'm blanking on the word I'm thinking of. I know the sentiment though. But the humility, when you feel like the people around you have a lot more experience than you do. And now that I have some time to think about this, I realize that the badge had some value, but not at the moment in which it was given to me. That's the great thing about digital badges. It's just like resumes. You can let people curate, and actually, this is what Charles and Wayne have just brought up. It's just like a CV. People have the freedom to decide what they show depending on who they're giving it to. Now, people don't make things up, but they reprioritize. They tell the story in a different way, because the story of our lives are not linear, and there are elements we edit out of every part of our day. When we sit down and tell somebody about our day or talk to a colleague or a friend, we leave out certain details, but when we're talking to someone else, other details become important. So we're constantly filtering and sharing. Now, resumes, however, whether they're online like LinkedIn or on paper, are your story, the story that you tell about yourself. Digital badges are issued by others for achievements they observe about you and with you and involving you. And so it's almost it can be a different perspective. So it's worth thinking about. I don't know about you, but there are some transcripts from some of my past that have some items on them that I wish I could have done this to. Anyone give me a smiley face if there's any lines on transcripts that you would have liked to have redacted. Generally, when you give your transcript to somebody, or when we give them to our students, they get the whole thing. They don't get a choice. And yet, digital badges do allow that level of curation because they're owned by the learner. And you know what? We don't have to be good at everything. But it's useful to know what we enjoy, what we're passionate about. It's useful to know when other people think we're doing a good job and want to encourage us to continue. Badges can play a role in all of that. So here's my Credly profile on Credly.com, and you can see some of the badges I have for certifications or conferences I've been involved in, or MOOCs, or I do a lot of work with museums, and I've earned some badges for that, or speaking engagements, and so forth. And each of these links back to either a recording of a talk I've given, or to the place I earned the credential, where you too can maybe take the course or involve yourself in that resource. And so it can provide inspiration to others who admire what you've done or what you're doing and want to look for opportunities to take a similar pathway. And I have a Speaks Volume badge. I absolutely do. I was very excited kind of to get that. Actually, I have my first one I got when I signed in. We'll take a look at that in a few moments. I can also take these badges, and I can, if I have a blog, I can go ahead and embed them on my site, like my old Learning in Times blog, which has not been updated in a long time, but there you have it. There are my badges sitting there. And that's dynamic, so every time I earn new ones, they automatically can show up there. So it really begins to help me tell the story in different places in my life. This is my LinkedIn settings, so I can go to my account settings in Credly and say that anytime I earn a badge from TXVSN, I want it to automatically go to my Twitter page. But anytime I earn, let's say a badge from something related to management courses I take, I want it to go to my LinkedIn wall, right? So I can kind of decide how I tell the story to different groups of people that are in my life. So that is, it's interesting to start to think about your achievement as how do other people view you, what did they observe you have, and then who do you want to impart and share that with. So Credly's got a Facebook app that lets you add to your profile on Credly the different badges you've both earned, but also the ones you've issued. Because actually, what you choose to recognize as an instructor, as a teacher, as a lifelong learner yourself, says as much about you as what you've earned. What you choose to recognize in your classroom. If you want to give a badge for people in your classroom who are collaborating, when somebody looks at that earner and sees they earned a collaboration badge from Connie, it not only means that the person who earned it is good at collaborating, it means that Connie values collaboration. So it says something about both of them. Now, if I look at that badge and I decide to give that person a job on one of my teams because of that badge, it shows I value that too. So it represents a relationship among three people. So if you get a badge that you don't value yourself, you don't have to accept other ones from that person or entity, and you don't have to do anything with the one you got. It's an exercise in curation. Does anyone have any questions or thoughts before I continue? And if you don't, just type in one thought that's on your mind relating to the topic, but doesn't have to be related to anything I've said so far. So if you don't have a question, go ahead and put in a thought. Something that this topic is bringing to your mind about how it applies to your own life, the life of your learners. It can be random, and it doesn't need to be spell checked. And it can be like a complete tangent, but something that's sparked. In fact, as we go along, as you have thoughts or comments, think of the chat area as a place to type notes to yourself. They don't have to be comments meant for anyone other than yourself, but I'd like a window into your thinking as well. I wonder, Davina, is it as cool as if it's from a teacher as it is from a peer? What if peers could give badges? And they can. There's a group, I'll see if I can find the link when we wrap up. If you search on Chromebook Trial, what's the name of the school? There's a school in the UK, a set of schools that is has rolled out badges, not just across curriculum areas, but especially in other areas like school safety, etiquette, values, service learning, extracurricular activities, sports, citizenship. And those are available to the learners because those are the things that traditionally don't get recognized in school. And I was reading a blog entry from Guy Shearer, is his name, and he was talking about how intrigued he was that here he was getting ready to think about what badges he was going to give to his students. And it turns out when he put the tools in front of them, they were using Credly for it, the students just went in and started to create credits. And then they were thinking about who they wanted to give it to. And they had their own realization. They said, well, yeah, anyone can kind of create a badge and give it to someone, but I don't want to be known as the person who gives out the silliest badges. I want it to be for things that are, cool or that I respect. And even at a young age, the kids were understanding that this is a work product. When you give someone a compliment, when you give someone something, it says something about you, not just about them. And that's a really important lesson, no matter how it unfolds in your classroom. Now, there are some emerging standards around badges that you may have heard of that kind of make this topic, I think, have some legs. And there are lots of different reasons and ways and places for people to give badges. But the idea that they're portable and that they're open and they can move across different sites means that people in completely different parts of the learning universe can issue recognition that sits next to recognition given from people they've never even met or didn't even know. So if your PTA gives you credit for being an active member of the PTA, and that PTA member who's shown up is actually a member of an industry union, let's say a manufacturer's union, and his or her industry reps give him or her recognition for a Lifelong Achievement Award or for a skill in welding. Now you've got a PTA award from a local school sitting next to a National Association for Manufacturing. That person's life is now being touched in a lot of different ways by different groups, but for achievements they have in the same lifetime. In the interest of time, I'm just going to spend 3 seconds per trend here as to why I think this is important, and then we're going to look at some real-world examples of some badging in action. I think the reason this whole badging topic is getting a lot of attention is because there's so many different things that are all converging that scream badges. And And by the way, Charles, the idea of using badges for onboarding new students, giving them some scaffolding and helping them kind of step up or step into a process is, I think, a brilliant idea. And in fact, it's a big part of the program that Connie has done with online badging, which is about orienting students to an online learning environment. Many of you may be familiar with the program. If you didn't, you should check out her session from earlier today. Self-directed learning is one of these trends, and I think the idea that we are all kind of feel like we know everything because we have Google or Wikipedia makes us appreciate the idea that someone might actually recognize us for all this learning we do independently and in a self-paced way. That goes for our learners too. How many of you who are instructors have had a student tell you were wrong, that they looked it up online or on Wikipedia or in an online community, or they know the guy online, or they're friends with the woman who wrote that or did that? We can be corrected all the time because we're not all knowledge experts. The web is often much smarter than we are when it comes to facts and information, and anyone willing to put in their time and energy can be a very good self-directed learner. Let me move very quickly and mention mobile lets us learn anywhere, so we can have companion guides wherever we go and make the world kind of a more interesting, kind of like having a docent with you wherever you go in the world. All the free open educational resources that are out there suggest that people can become experts by taking MOOCs and courses like edX and all the open learning, and that might not be on a transcript, but people know things. And then they're playlisting all of the kind of all of these learning experiences into creating your own pathways. And we're leaving tracks as we go along in the snow. So you've got things like ePals and the Smithsonian and lots of places where you can upload student work, and we're leaving tracks all over the place, whether we're really avid in our TripAdvisor community or in an online learning site like these. And how do we give credit for all of that? And we're becoming, some of us better than others. We're dealing with how do we curate the tracks we leave behind in the snow or the sand. That's an excellent question. It may be neither, because to some extent the tracks we leave online, Nikki, are a lot more permanent than the tracks in the snow or the sand. It's hard to erase the tracks we leave in online environments. They tend to be there much longer than they would in ephemeral places. So I like you kind of bringing that to our attention. And then you've got all the game mechanics that help us kind of visualize progress, even when we didn't realize we were making progress. All of these things kind of point to a world in which recognizing achievement matters, and that we can't rely on doing it in the old ways we used to. So let's look at some examples of groups that are acknowledging learning in some of these ways, and why and how they're doing it. Is it to lift people up? Is it to make them loyal to an organization or give them special privileges? And as we look at some of these things, think about badges that sort of stay in Vegas versus go anywhere. What I mean by that is sometimes badges, like in a way the military badges, they kind of stay in the military. Yeah, they're on uniforms, but they're largely seen by other military members, versus badges that are sort of open badges or world shareable that can go anywhere and sit side by side with others. Take care, not to worry. We're recording it, and thank you, Connie, for everything. And indeed, hey Charles, yes, this is the gold stars that you're talking about that. And Wayne, please jump in. Do you have a mic? I know you do. I heard you before. Agree vocally, disagree vocally, if you can.
Okay, sorry, I had to dig it out from under the desk. I'll disagree with you that on the military service members. Even after 40 years after I was in the military, I still recognize things like the Republic of Vietnam Service Medal that's often displayed on the back of cars of people who served in Vietnam. You'll see the Iraq Operation Freedom badge or ribbon displayed now on a lot of guys. The service the service emblems. For example, you'll see a lot of Marine emblems on the back of ex-Marines. Even though they've been out of the Marines for 40 years, they are no longer Marines, but they are always Marines, if you get my drift.
I entirely get your drift, and thank you for sharing that. And you're right. When you see an emblem that you recognize on a bumper sticker, it's a shareable badge, and it's been put in a form where it's not just relying on the uniform for it to be shared. That's a brilliant example. But it also ties very nicely to this topic because which are badges that have greater meaning, that can leave the environment in which they were given. I think it's useful for some people to think about, you know what, these are badges of recognition that I want to give in my classroom because we have sort of a code and understanding, a community around it. But it might not mean anything once it leaves that classroom because it's more about a progress indicator towards a bigger goal. It's being used more as like a game mechanic than it is as for a true skill recognition. And so another way I think about these badges are which ones are like the gold stars that Charles was hearkening back to a moment ago, and which ones are like the gold seals. I mean the gold star like the attaboy, attagirl that goes like on the top of a single paper versus the gold seal that means you served your time. It means you spent 4 years on a degree, or your institution was certified, or your building was certified by the U.S. National Green Building Council or something like that. So just to kind of think about that, there's an entire spectrum here, both in terms of shareable, non-shareable, meaning, big meaning, small meaning, little meaning in between, because there's a lot to think about. And these are just some examples of things you might possibly put on each end of the continuum. And then here's some things that are maybe in the gray area that you could argue could go on either side or somewhere along the way. I believe everyone who puts themselves in the role of issuer can decide where what they value fits. But if they're trying to connect with the work that other educators, other folks are doing, museums and other groups, they're going to start to think about how do I want the achievements I'm recognizing to fit into a taxonomy that might be much bigger than even my own work. That's an interesting point, Charles, about leaving Cub Scouts. I only got as far as completing Cub Scouts. I never went into Boy Scouts myself. I got my, what was it called, my Arrow of Light, and then I did not go into Boy Scouts. So in a way, my Cub Scout uniform is sitting in the top bureau drawer in my childhood room at my parents' house on Long Island. I visited it recently, the drawer, so I could check out what those badges look like since I've been in this world on the digital side recently. So in a way, it's kind of like the elephant, the proverbial elephant, where we all have our eyes closed and we're touching different parts of the elephant and describing different things, but it's the same beast. So let's look at some. I'm going to just jump ahead here and take a look at some things that people value in the world. Here's an example from the University of Wisconsin, a course for educators, graduate level courses around games for learning and assessment, taught by my colleague Susan Manning. And in her course, she has a sort of gold seal badge for completing this course. It doesn't substitute the grade, by the way. The University of Wisconsin staff has not given up grades and transcripts, but within the context of the program, all of her learners get a shareable badge they can go put out into various social media and into their Credly site and elsewhere that lets people know that they have got a credential in this area. But she also has internal badges, people who are good at answering other students' questions. She also values humor. It's an online course, and she wants people to be human and humane and have some fun. And so appropriate uses of humor, especially in a course about games for learning and assessment, is something she values and she recognizes with an internal badge. So one shareable badge and a couple that are internal to her course. There's a service learning group out of the University of Southern California where students who do volunteer work are getting course credit, but they are also now getting credentials that recognize things like do they share back with the community tips for the next group who go to that same elder center or to that same food shelter about how best to serve the people there. So out-of-school things. The Smithsonian National Design Awards are one way that the Cooper Hewitt National Design Museum recognize youth who come to their, well, they recognize industry experts once a year with the National Design Awards, but they also do programs throughout the year for youth, and they've begun to give badges for attendance at their after-school programs, and they've also been thinking about how can they enable other people to give credit for things that they as a museum value. And they're actually beginning to create shareable, givable badges. So it's not just that it's shareable once it's been awarded, but imagine that somebody gave you a Nobel Prize. Not gave it to you, but gave you the plaque and say, go give this to somebody else. Who do you think deserves the Peace Prize? Who do you think deserves the prize in chemistry? And so we have this notion of allow others to give the credit that I have defined. It's a valuable and interesting approach. Charles says, so as humans, would we not want to earn badges to impress our audience? Should I go and get a video game badge to get recognition by my high school students, or a skateboarding badge? I wonder what other people think. I love the question. It's funny because to some extent, a badge could take 4 years to get. I don't know how long it would take me to learn skateboarding, and honestly, I'm a little too, I shouldn't say this. I thought I was a little too old for skateboarding, and I recently got a longboard skateboard, and I went out to the street in front of my house, and I stood on it, and it just started zipping away on me, and I thought, I am going to break my fingers and not be able to do my job, and I got scared. It's going to take me a long time to get a skateboarding badge. My point being, are the badges worth having? Do they take, I mean, would you go commit to 3 months to learn skateboarding, or 3 weeks, or 3 days, or 3 hours, depending on how you take to it? Would you go learn how to do video game? It's not about the badge. If the badge is worth having, it's probably worth a commensurate amount of effort. But it does make you think about it. If there were recognition, I mean, and you actually had a skateboarding badge, it probably would impress your students. I don't know. What do you guys think about Charles's really awesome question? I'm going to be thinking about this one, actually, because it really gets to motivation, and it digs out the fact that badges are not just badges worth having aren't necessarily just issued for just like that. Would your students believe you if you had a skateboarding badge but knew you couldn't skateboard, or thought you couldn't skateboard? What would the evidence be? Would it be a link to a YouTube video of you skateboarding? Probably. Okay, cool stuff. You can define these things and put in categories. There's all sorts of classroom values: academic integrity, research skills for professionals, people who are good at getting grants and following up and so forth. Nikki, I would argue that I contemplated, by the way, whether to have a badge for your participation in this session today. Would I create one? And I've done that before. I know you asked with a smiley face, but it's a good question. What is the minimum bar for a badge for you? And it might vary from context to context. Something you might give to a family member might be very different than you give to a student. Okay. I want to have some time to get to a couple more things, and I tend to have a lot more visuals than time, so I'm just going to jump ahead here to a couple more examples. I'm going to leave time for some more of these awesome questions. One of the things that this kind of goes to that question about would you learn to skateboard for a badge? Well, if it was to get greater recognition or respect from your students, maybe you would. But what if the badge you earned also gave you powers? I mean, you could argue that you have the power of respect that respect brings by your students, and you can get them to the street cred, as Charles puts it. But here's an example. This is a school in Atlanta that has a series of badges for the core values the school believes in. It's a Jewish day school in Atlanta. And so what they did was they named each badge after a famous Jewish figure. So, for example, they have the Elie Wiesel badge for, which one was that? I think it was for reflective learning. And they have a information literacy badge by Sergey Brin, the co-founder of Google. And there's 3 things you have to do in their school. You have to produce evidence that you can recognize information literacy when you see it, that you can talk about it, and that you do it yourself. And you produce evidence you can, it doesn't say go do information literacy by finding an inaccuracy on Wikipedia, or it just says this is what we value. If you think you have evidence that you have recognized, talked, or done something about information literacy, produce it. And there's a committee of people at the school that review it periodically and will award them a badge. I am just trying to read through some of your comments as well here. This is awesome. Let me just make the chat box a little bigger here. That's easier. The text is a little small. I'm sorry about that, Barbara. But essentially, it says that this badge requires you to recognize credible information, talk about what makes a source credible, and demonstrate that you can put the skills to use. That's the core part of that. They even print the badges out and let the students wear them around their neck. And that's a way of having that kind of recognition in a physical environment. Another thing that badges can do is say that, oh, and by the way, I meant to say that they also give the students privileges within the environment. So they might get access to the school media center or library at a time when other students aren't allowed, or they can spend their study hall doing, going out to lunch, or using like school resources that are closed otherwise to people without the badge. I'm working with a library system right now that is using badges to, when you go through training courses on using hardware, digital video editing, audio editing, 3D printing machine hardware, and then when you are certified that you've been trained, you get a digital badge, and the librarians check your badges to give you access to the studio so you can use it on your own. Nothing new here, but we're saying if it's digital, does it open up more doors? If we all have the power to do this, what does it mean to our learning environments? My 5th grade teacher, Mr. Roger, used to say when I would bring my little math ditto, my math worksheet up, independent work, you'd go bring it up to him, he would grade it, and you'd be like, oh, hey, I finished. You bring it up, and he'd go, all right, Jonathan, the reward for good work is more work. And then he'd hand me another worksheet to do, and I'd be off on a harder one, right? But privilege recognition sometimes comes with responsibility. You now can take on more responsibility, and just because you have more work to do, that's a good thing. It means you're progressing, and you might unlock further rewards down the road. Speaking of unlocking rewards, the New York City Department of Probation did an interesting pilot with us just this last spring that led to some really interesting new thinking around this notion of self-directed probation. These are youth who are in the juvenile justice system who need to complete certain service and tasks in order to complete their court-mandated probation time. And a lot of times that time is wasted. Students wind up getting further entrenched into the behaviors that got them there to begin with. And what we've been exploring is, what if you enlighten pathways for these youth and say, look, New York City is a giant classroom. You don't have to call it that, but there's a million fun things to do where you can learn at the same time, and maybe even expose you to new careers and ideas. This is a group called the Hive Network in New York. And what we did was we said, pretty much you can go to any of these places, go to a workshop, meet a curator, do an after-school program, go to a gallery, produce some evidence that you were there, and tell us what you learned. Bring it back, or post it. They sent it in via text and online, and the evidence was used to issue them a badge via Credly, which automatically went to their Facebook page. And interestingly, we didn't make the badges say that they came from the New York City Department of Probation, because honestly, how many people want to wear that badge? It's not a badge you want to carry with you for the rest of your life, that you had to essentially serve time in one way or another. But the badges were instead issued by the organizations that interacted with the youth, and with like a separately branded entity that was just about youth doing cool things in New York to learn life skills and career pathways. Pretty neat. The New York City Department of Education is doing a lot of interesting work with badges. It's actually what kind of kick-started my work in this area a few years ago, was developing a community. Oh my goodness. Does that mean it's time for questions, or does it mean it's time for me to wrap up?
It's just your timer. You totally can take about 10 or 15 more minutes to wrap up and do questions.
Okay, thank you.
Uh-huh.
I hadn't realized the timer was going, and it was sort of a delightful like shift in my mindset to be like, oh. But I'm hoping people are keeping their questions and comments going as we go along. And I am close to sort of wrapping things up. So leave your questions and comments in so that we're sure to cover them. Get them rolling in right now. So a timer badge indeed. So a digital literacy program in New York City to teach second chance high school students, transfer schools they're called. These are overaged, undercredited youth. It's a hybrid program, and they're learning technology skills that will serve them whether they go into career directly, a vocational path, or into higher education. So you'll see some really interesting badges around both skills, but also community involvement. To my Texas friends here with us today, this is one of my favorite projects. Comes out of the Dallas Museum of Art. Anyone in the Dallas area? Curious? Oh, Arlington. Oh, cool. We got a bunch. Have any of you been to the DMA, the Dallas Museum of Art, since let's say Martin Luther King Day, late January? Barbara has. Barbara, have you seen the DMA Friends program? There are now kiosks around the museum. You should go. You walk into the DMA, and you will be greeted by DMA staff who will be delighted to see you, and they'll introduce you to something called DMA Friends. Admission at the Dallas Museum of Art is now free. Oh, cool. Barbara saw it. I'm not going to put you on the spot, Barbara, to take the mic or Charmaine to talk about it, but unless you want to, in which case just grab the mic and start talking. But you join. It's free, and admission is now free at the DMA. And not only that, but membership is free too. Oh, okay, good. I'm sorry. Thank you for captioning, Barbara. So you sign up, you get a free membership card, and you will now get benefits for your engagement with the museum, and you'll get badges. You go to different gallery spaces around the museum, you'll enter codes. If you come by public transportation, or you propose to a future spouse at the museum, or you bring friends with you, there are lots of things you can do that involve engagement and learning, and you will get points and credit for those things, and you will get badges. And when you have enough points and badges, you can go ahead and trade them in, redeem your points for rewards that tie to the DMA. Rewards like having lunch with a curator, or having your parking pass validated so you can park for free. Even spending a night at the museum with your friends overnight. It's pretty cool. So you'll earn badges. Badges are, what's interesting here, in light of also what Charmaine said, is the badges are in the background. Nobody says when you walk in, go join DMA Friends so you can earn badges. They say, please join our DMA Friends program so that you can get the most out of your experience with the DMA. And as they engage and do different things, they earn these points and badges. And behind the scenes, we're using a tool called BadgeOS, which is a free open source tool that we've put out that's being modified and changed and altered and transformed in so many interesting ways. But right out of the box, it's a really powerful tool. You can set up activities, create badges, create groups of activities. We're using this now at the Cincinnati Museum, which is launching a STEM program for girls and trying to reinforce their interest in science and technology and math. And they go to a dinosaur exhibit and interact with a curator and get a code they enter on a kiosk, and boom, they get a badge. So we're seeing this being used in a lot of different places. We're also using it with ISTE and the New Media Consortium. You should check out catalyst-academy.org. This is a site for free open courses around STEM education. Courses on how to use Facebook to teach online, courses like using geolocation technologies. So check that out, catalyst-academy.org. Maybe somebody can put that in the chat for others. Very interesting stuff. Okay, I'm going to move towards concluding here. The YMCA is also using badging to capture learning that happens around fitness education. And we've got youth who sign in on kiosks at the branches in New York. They will earn, thank you for that, Lee. They have playlists they can follow. They choose a playlist. It tries to not only say, go play basketball, but did you know, yeah, you want to be a pro basketball player? But did you know that pro basketball players also lift weights? They work on stamina, they swim laps, they don't just go shoot hoops. And by the way, did you know that doing those things makes you healthier? And if you do it 1 hour a day, 5 days a week, you might earn the Presidential Fitness Challenge, which means you're on your path to having a healthy lifestyle and earn that Presidential Fitness Award. And that, by the way, can sit side by side with the award you got, the badge you got from being a muralist, or for learning technology skills in Dig It. So it really starts to complete the story from the different parts of your life. The Smithsonian has some great resources you should check out too. SmithsonianEducationConferences.org. It's a mouthful, but SmithsonianEducationConferences.org. Free online conferences. This has been a highlight of my life in the last couple of years. I get to go and sit next to these awesome Smithsonian curators, ask them questions, and let them share with people live online like we're doing now about their incredible areas of study and expertise. And they are amazing. And they are free, and you earn badges to indicate you've participated. They have these both for teachers, for professional development. In fact, most sessions are a teacher workshop and then a student one. We're doing a series of 3 this summer on astrophotography. Check those out. The astrophotography badge is pretty cool too. And then you can go to SmithsonianQuest.org, and this is a great place to sign up if you have youth. It's meant for K-12 schools, and you get your class to join and sign up, and then they submit artifacts and evidence using Smithsonian free resources, and then there's Smithsonian-wide national educators who review the work according to rubrics from the Smithsonian and give students direct feedback. It's pretty cool. No, that's it. You don't have to go to the Smithsonian Museum to earn these badges. All of these badges that I just mentioned from the Smithsonian, SmithsonianQuest.org, and Smithsonian Education Conferences, all free, all online. Very cool stuff. And yeah, you should check it out. Topics like immigration, migration, as I said, astrophotography. Did a session a few weeks ago. Free resources. You can go online. You can tell a telescope where to point in the sky, a deep space telescope, and then in the morning you'll have an email waiting for you with the photographs that it took of the night sky, and then online resources on how to analyze your photo, jazz it up, and make it look like the cool stuff you see on NASA's website. And all free, and you earn badges from taking part. Okay, well, I want to wrap up. And just see if you guys have any thoughts or questions. Also, just going to leave you with a couple of resources that you can take a look at. I mentioned a few of these places that are issuing badges. I do suggest, actually I should mention, and Connie mentioned this earlier, making an investment in yourself is something you're all doing right now. You've all been here joining me for the last hour, and you're all part of this incredible Speaking Volumes conference. Some people say, should you earn a badge for attending a conference? I happen to think that it says a lot about who we are when we take time out of our busy day, out of our summer, to go and further our own learning. I mean, the return of the Star Wars glasses, going to McDonald's 4 times or whatever to get, collect all 4, it does show an interest. I think that earning a badge for professional development, like coming to a workshop, as you all are through the Moodle site you're part of, is a worthy badge. Each of you will decide that. So I hope you'll check out BadgeOS. It's, as I said, it's free. It's an add-on to WordPress. We also have teams available to provide support and instructional guidance if you need it, as you think about that. And certainly Credly.com, which is a really easy place just to show up. You can design a badge, you can give it to somebody, and you can keep it on hold to give it to a group of students. You can give it to the 50 kids in your class, upload a spreadsheet, and issue badges very easily. And it's free and a lot of fun to use. So let me go ahead and address some of these thoughts and questions that have come in. We had this question from Nikki, who said, I think you're onto something quite powerful. Thank you. You can tell I'm a little bit excited about it myself. Unsolicited recognition for unofficial hidden skills or good works is a way of passing it forward, isn't it? If we can make it easy for people to recognize other people for the stuff they're doing right in front of us that we can observe, that can actually make a difference in their lives, shouldn't we make it easy for people to do that? And wouldn't you want to do that? if you could give out that Nobel Peace Prize to somebody, wouldn't you? It would mean something. Thank you for that awesome comment. Lee says, do these badges show up on Mozilla or some central place? Absolutely. In fact, when you go to Credly, let me actually just see if I can show this to you really quickly. Tools, application sharing. Let me just switch to a different window, and I will show you this. Okay, and now I will start sharing. Okay. So with any luck, you guys are seeing my actual screen. It looks like you are. And you'll see here is, let me see if I'm logged in as me still. I just opened this tab from before. Yeah, good. So if you look here are badges that are sitting in my inbox on Credly, things I haven't yet accepted. And there are also badges that I've categorized and that are on my profile. I kind of showed you this a little bit before. You can't give a badge to yourself, though. That's right, Lisa. we think that it should come from an observer. You might ask someone to give you a badge, but it should come from them. I'm glad you tried it, though, and that it worked, or didn't, because it's the way it worked the way it should. But notice this. Here's a badge I earned from joining the Catalyst Academy. If I want, I can click this little share button right here. And I have options to share it on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Mozilla. So those of you familiar with the Mozilla Backpack, you can send your badge right there. You also have these really cool account settings where you can add as many of your email addresses as you like, but you can also set up some automated things like, let's see, like I can set up the automation so that, I showed you this a little earlier, but let's say I want badges that go to my conferences category to automatically go to LinkedIn. I can do that kind of thing. So it's, oh, and where would it appear on Facebook? It appears, we have a Facebook app that gets enabled on your Facebook page, and it goes into your profile. I'm not sure if I'm not really logged into my own Facebook account here, so I won't go that route. But it creates a credit issued, credit earned on your Facebook profile, and you can decide where to move it. Like, do you want it above your favorite movies or below your favorite movies? And it also shows up on your feed, on your wall as you go along. But you get to, there's a lot of settings that you can customize. You can create lists of people and so forth. Badges in animated GIF format, no. The Mozilla standard requires right now that badges be in PNG format, and so Credly complies with that format as well. The unique thing about PNG files is that they contain and can carry data with them, and like the evidence and so forth. In fact, one of the most important things when you look at my badges, you'll see that the badges that I've earned, like here's the astrophotography one I told you about, and you can see I can link out to the evidence that I was involved in that session. I can click the View Evidence link, and it takes me to Smithsonian Education Online Conferences where the archive is, and so forth. So you have all that data that gets carried with the badge. Did I miss any questions? Where can I learn more about implementing badges in the university classes I teach? Excellent question. So Lee, first of all, I'm not sure if you can certainly visit our blog at blog.credly.com. You can check out the Open Badges website. I'm also teaching a course on that exact topic later in August with EDUCAUSE. And if you go to educause.edu and then search on their short courses, it's online. It's an online course. It's a 3-part online course. Thank you, Joy. And if you go to their events section, you'll see it listed as a short course. So they're offering that. But that's a start. And you can certainly drop me a line if you have thoughts or questions at any point. That's true for everybody. And I will do my best to point you in the right direction. At Credly is our Twitter handle. And we're also on Facebook at facebook.com/Credly. So follow us there and check things out. Okay, I think I'm right on time. I'm going to stop with my sincere thanks to all of you for being part of this event and spending an hour with me, which is a really long time. Thanks.
What a treat, Jonathan. Thank you so much for sharing with us. I am going to go ahead and move to the conclusion part. I'm going to let you go ahead and close out your application sharing, and that will bring up our conclusion screen. There we go. Moving right along. Lots of good information on badges, incredibly good stuff to know. All the museums at the DMA is a wonderful place. It's a lot of fun. All right, there are book discounts available, and I think that Connie shared those earlier. This recording will be available tomorrow, and it will be available for a year, through July 2014. By attending this conference, you automatically will receive the credit. You just need to go and look and make sure that your name appears under attendance today, but you don't have to do anything. It all is automatically pushed out to you. The badge is pushed out to you. There it is. The badges, we talked about that today, is automatically pushed out to you. So enjoy your evening. We have our final day tomorrow. There's a session at 6, I believe, and so we look forward to seeing everyone. And have a great evening. Jonathan, again, thank you so much for your time today.
Yep, thank you. It was my pleasure. Thanks for organizing the event. Take care.